Good morning. My name is Andrew Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of Door County NOC. We're a nonprofit news organization covering Door County, and it's an honor to be with you all this morning. Thank you so much for having me. I was here speaking with you all last July, but for anybody who was not here that day, here's a bit about me. I'm a Door County native. My family moved to Egg Harbor when I was 2, and I grew up and went to Gibraltar schools, graduated from Gibraltar High School, and attended Marquette University, where I studied philosophy and journalism. In 2020, almost 2 years ago, I started NOC, this nonprofit news organization, and we're focused on covering the issues, institutions, and decision makers that affect Door County residents' lives. So we report a lot about economic and social issues that affect a lot of residents, but don't always get talked about a lot. Things like affordable housing, childcare, seasonal unemployment, substance dependency, mental health, and food insecurity. We're a nonprofit organization. Our work is funded by readers as well as major donors and foundation giving. So I want to talk with you today about food insecurity in our community and the importance of not othering this issue and the importance of owning this and other issues as a community. Just to start out, to kind of give you a sense of the scope of food insecurity in Door County. United Way of Door County and United Way more broadly tracks statistics that are referred to as ALICE. For anybody who's not familiar with that, ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And so I'm quoting from United Way's website here. By definition, ALICE families and individuals are those who make more than the federal poverty level, but less than the ALICE threshold, which is what is needed to afford the basic necessities of housing, childcare, food, transportation, and healthcare. So in Door County, in 2018, which is the most recent year when this data is available, Door County had a little more than 13,000 households total. 31% of those, so almost 4,100 households, were considered ALICE, meaning they were either below the federal poverty level or below the ALICE threshold of being able to afford basic needs. Those numbers have thankfully declined slightly in the past few years. They were at 35% in 2014 and 34% in 2016. But that's still roughly 1 in 3 households in Door County that are struggling to make a life here. Another way to look at the scope of food insecurity is the percentage of students in our school districts that are enrolled in free or reduced price meal programs. And those numbers, unfortunately, have been increasing a lot. In 2021, so last school year, the percentage of students enrolled in free and reduced price meals at Gibraltar was 41.6%, up from 26% in 2015-16. Southern Door similarly was at 41.7% last year, up from 34% in 2015-16. And in Sturgeon Bay, the number was 51.7% last year, up from 43% in 2015-16. So this is really, I think can be shocking for us to look at because it's a huge, huge percentage of the young people and of the residents in Door County. At NOC, we've also done a bit of reporting about food insecurity. Actually, the first story that I published back in April of 2020 was focusing a lot on food insecurity. At that time, we were in the middle of the first COVID shutdown, and there was really a lot of economic uncertainty in the community. And I think particularly that was true for a lot of working class residents, people who work in the service industries, restaurant workers. And so that story that we reported at that time covered a lot of the efforts of the Door County Meals Cooperative that had arisen to address that need, and that was handing out hundreds of meals every week through the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, and emergency services personnel helping out with that as well. I was really struck in reporting that story. I interviewed somebody who's an executive chef at a restaurant in Northern Door and who was unemployed because of the shutdown. And he said something to me that I probably will never forget, that I think indicates that food insecurity in Door County was not just a short-term thing because of the shutdown, but is an ongoing issue. He said, "I've lived poor my whole life. I'm pretty good at it." Or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but that this is something that he was used to, and kind of was able to slip back into navigating that during that shutdown. We also reported just a few months ago in November 2021 about the continuing needs and continuing food insecurity in our community. The story was done by a really excellent young reporter who's working with us at NOC named Lily Sweeney. And Lily interviewed Adam Paranta, who was part of the Meals Cooperative during those early COVID months. And he was reflecting a bit on his surprise at some of the needs he saw and how broad they were in our community. And I'll just read a quote that Adam said to Lily in this story. He said, "Some of the populations we were reaching I didn't expect. I spoke with an artist in town who had lost all his gigs and wasn't able to sell any of his work, and he was starving. He was so humble he didn't want to reach out to a free meal line, but he realized he had to. We were getting people in the lower income bracket, but also people whose jobs weren't around anymore and who needed to eat." Lily also talked and wrote a bit about schools and had interviewed Jenny Spoody, who's the Surgeon Bay School District's food service director, and found out that not only were schools seeing really increased needs for free and reduced price meals during last school year, but that multiple school districts in our community today are continuing free or reduced price or reimbursable meals for all students because of the needs that they've seen. And then finally, from that story in November, Lily reported that food assistance providers had seen an increase in needs this past fall, including among seniors. So I think that really just points to, again, confirming that this is an ongoing issue in our community and not something that was just a one-time thing during the early months of the COVID shutdown. So I mentioned I want to talk a bit about the importance of not othering this issue of food insecurity in Door County. Just to touch a bit on a separate issue, but I was interviewing United Way leaders about a month ago. A lot of you may have heard United Way received a $3.5 million state grant to address childcare needs in our community, and that was really fantastic news. But I was talking with Amy Conley, the director of United Way of Door County, about the long-term implications of that grant. And she said something that struck me. She said, "I think the key is stressing that this is the community's problem. This money is to benefit the community." So she was kind of emphasizing that United Way is the one that wrote this grant and that will sort of act as a conduit for this money. But in terms of the childcare issues that our community has seen, this is something that our community really needs to own as a whole and does own. And I think that's true for food insecurity or a lot of these other issues that we can talk about as well. As the numbers that we've just gone through have illustrated, the scope of food insecurity in our community is huge. And that reinforces that people dealing with food insecurity in our community are not an other group. They're not obscure in any way. This is us that we're talking about, not just our neighbors, but us. I'm not a UU. I grew up in the Ephraim Church down the road, but a member of this congregation recently pointed me to the 7 UU principles as I was preparing my talk for today. I have so much respect for these principles and for the work that you all do, and I just want to touch on a few that particularly jumped out to me. I want to start with the first and second principles and to link them together here. The first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. These two principles to me point to the importance of addressing food insecurity, as well as how we can best address it. I think it's so important to keep the human element and that inherent worth and dignity of every person in mind as we're offering assistance. Something that I've wrestled with as a journalist and that I always have to keep in mind is how to write about these difficult issues in a way that humanizes them. And, I think it's easy for me as a reporter to kind of focus on the numbers, which are really important and illustrate the scope of the issue. But something that I try to keep in mind is how can I work with people to tell their stories rather than telling those stories in a way that could be exploitative or extractive in any way. Similarly, I think when any of us offer assistance for food insecurity, it's so important to connect on a human level. What does dealing with food insecurity mean in our community, on an emotional level, or in day-to-day life? And in addition to providing food itself, how can we help in that realm and connect in a way that can support somebody on that human or emotional level? Finally, I do want to touch on the fourth principle as well, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. This principle certainly resonates with me as a journalist and is the driving force behind what we do at NOC. But I think it's all of our work as a community as well. One of the other nonprofit news organizations that I really respect that's based in Wisconsin is called Wisconsin Watch, and it's a statewide investigative news agency based in Madison. Wisconsin Watch has three principles that guide its reporting: protect the vulnerable, expose wrongdoing, explore solutions. It's easy to see how that first principle relates to what we're doing today and what we're talking about today. People dealing with food insecurity definitely are vulnerable, and the work that you all are doing and that groups such as the Door County Food Pantry Coalition are doing is so important to bring assistance in a comprehensive way throughout our community. I think that third principle, explore solutions, is important for us all to think about too. As we provide assistance, how can we bring about changes in our community that address the root causes of food insecurity and reduce the number of people dealing with it? We want that number to be zero. How can we create a community where that ideal is reality? I don't have the answers to these questions, but I think they're important to explore and are worth exploring. And I want to leave you with that thought today. Thank you so much again for having me, and thank you so much for all the work that you do. Hope you have a great rest of your day.